Phase 2 of Classic WoW's Season of Discovery is about to begin, and with Phase 1 duly coming to an end, I thought it was about time to review the experience so far. So for those of you who have never played this newest version of Classic WoW and are wondering if it's worth a try, and for those of you who are playing and just want to know if I got Deadly Strike on my warrior, this is the video for you. So the best way to get a general feel for how well a game is doing, especially an MMO, is to go out into the game world, look at its player base, and ask yourself how healthy the population appears to be. Now, Season of Discovery has been out for over 2 months, which doesn't seem like a long time, but keeping players interested for even that long is a difficult task in any MMO. It follows then that if we can see that the game has a lot of active, invested players, then it is likely providing the right entertainment for those players. It's giving them what they want to keep playing, which is a great measure of its success. I play on the Chaos Bolt EU server, which, as you can see from this realm list, is far from being the biggest server available to choose from. But when you realise that all the footage I'm showing you in the background is from this medium populated server, yet the world is still this busy, it should demonstrate how well Classic WoW is doing. On my warrior, I've completed all of the content available in this phase of the season. I've cleared the raid numerous times and equipped more gear than Arnie in Commando. I've done a lot of PvP in Ashen Veil and some BGs. Hell, I've even spent several nights travelling all the way to Duskwood and Redridge to terrorise the Alliance. Why, you ask? No reason. I just like doing things like that. The point I'm making here is that I've explored pretty much all that the season can offer at this point, with the caveat that for the first time ever, I've managed to stick to playing just one character that I've grown very attached to. With this experience, I feel qualified to state that the player population is as healthy as it looks, and it has remained consistently so. I have seen no discernible drop-off in players since the launch of the season. Getting a group of randos to run a raid is quick and easy, and the Ashen Veil PvP event is still packed. Hell, I'd even found myself in a big brawl in Stone Talon Mountains of all places a few nights ago, with groups of Horde and Alliance players skirmishing along the roads across the zone. This last event is particularly impressive as an example of the health of the player base, because Stone Talon is essentially just a levelling zone devoid of any instances or obvious significance beyond being a place where certain classes need to go to complete parts of their rune quests, which I'll talk about in a moment. Most importantly, for any of you who are thinking of starting a new character in Season of Discovery, or who gave the season a shot but took a break over the holidays and now feel left behind, I've seen loads of fresh characters being levelled all the time. A combination of the new class design elements and the low level cap have made it easier and more interesting than ever to make alts, so whether you're beginning your adventure from scratch or jumping back in, I'm sure you'll find a ton of other players adventuring alongside you. Okay, so I've hopefully convinced you by this point that the season is doing well with a healthy, consistent player base. But what about the content? Are the guys regularly logging into Classic just addicts, or is there more to it than that? Is the game actually fun to play? Well, let's get the obvious out of the way. This is ultimately still Classic WoW. I can confirm as someone who has been playing on era servers extensively right up to the release of the season that the changes implemented here don't ruin the feel or spirit of vanilla, if such a thing exists. There will always be some people who dislike a certain change, and it's impossible for any developer to get everything perfect. But I would argue that for the most part, the devs have done a fantastic job of adding enough new content whilst maintaining an energy and approach to the season that's consistent with the vanilla game it's built on. For example, let's look at the Black Fathom Deeps raid. Now, to be honest with you, I was never a huge fan of BFD in its dungeon form. It's quite unique in some respects, being essentially the only instance outside of the endgame and Courage raids to feature an old god theme. But personally, I'm not a big fan of subterranean cave dungeons like Wailing Caverns and BFD, though I do love Moradon. Moradon is bliss. So coming into Season of Discovery, I was interested to see what would be done with this dungeon to make it a bit more interesting. And I can truly say, having completed the raid many times over, that I think it's great. The length is balanced correctly, you have to invest time but it doesn't drag, and the 10-man group size makes grouping up an efficient, swift process, whether you're joining a completely random pug or trying to run the raid as a guild. Best of all, the difficulty level nails what I would consider to be the classic experience. Fights feel engaging enough for you to be prepared, pay attention and focus on what you're doing, without feeling like a tiring slog. There are bosses in the raid that I look forward to fighting because I enjoy their mechanics and can see myself improving with each encounter. For example, I particularly love Lorgus Jet for some reason, probably because it's fun trying to wail on him and his lightning totem as much as possible whilst keeping an eye out for the giant cheese ball of death. And all of this marries up so well with the simple, fulfilling, tried and tested gearing process of vanilla, which I have always loved. Upgrades are meaningful, and it's easy to understand if a piece of gear is worth rolling for. And developing your character is a steady process which makes running the raid a couple of times a week rewarding, even months into the phase. My good friend Tim, for example, just obtained his epic crossbow with only 1 week to go before the release of Phase 2, and it was a great moment, not just for him, but for all of us who were there. A truly satisfying payoff for the time invested in the raid. And speaking of time investment, one aspect of Classic WoW which continues into Season of Discovery is that it respects your time as a player. Without going on too much of a tangent, I found myself disappointed a lot by how many modern games, especially MMOs, including retail WoW, feel compelled to throw so much random stuff at the player. Having a lot of optional content in your MMO is great, but as soon as it starts to feel like a chore, as soon as it stops being optional, then the fun gets sucked out of it and people log off. It almost seems that developers lack confidence in the ability of their game to hold on to the attention of players, but ironically making them feel obliged to log in to complete these essential tasks is what leads to that disinterest. Season of Discovery isn't like that. If you have a busy schedule and only have time to play for a couple of nights a week, plus the odd session here and there on the weekend, that's fine. The gameplay loop is relatively simple yet satisfying, and knowing that it's your choice whether you want to join a pub for the raid, farm honour, work on your professions for gold, or start a whole new character to explore the changes to other classes, you can do it all without feeling like you're making the right or wrong choice. You're just playing the game the way you want, and that's awesome. Let's turn now then to talk a moment about PvP. Most people who want to enjoy some serious PvP in Phase 1 of the season have been spamming Warsong Gulch runs like there's no tomorrow. But as the battleground hasn't changed at all in itself, there's not much to report here. Obviously, the class design changes which came into effect with Season of Discovery have spiced things up quite a lot, with many specialisations playing very differently in both PvE and especially PvP. But ultimately, the battleground is still the same, and for the present we've had no announcement of a brand new BG for the season, though I suspect we'll probably get that later down the line. There has of course also been the Ashen Veil PvP event, which, while certainly spectacular the first times you do it, got pretty boring for me fairly quickly. I think the issue from my perspective is that because the objectives of the event were so clearly focused around killing NPC mini-bosses, actually fighting enemy players was inefficient. And we know us MMO players love to make things efficient, can't have fun getting in the way of that now, can we? Fortunately, the Stranglethorn Vale PvP event that is coming in Phase 2 appears to be completely focused around actual player versus player combat, which is great. And there are some interesting items to be brought in as well as rewards, so look forward to that. My disappointment, if you want to call it that, in the Ashen Veil event isn't something that diminishes my high opinion of SOD so far, because it was always designed to be experimental and unique, and I'm sure that the devs will take the lessons learned from it and apply them going forward, which we can already see with the more player versus player focused event coming in Phase 2. But one last PvP centric point I'd like to make concerns the way that the Rune System has impacted the game. You see, throughout the season, players have had to explore the zones populated by the opposing faction to get materials, kill enemies, and generally complete quest objectives necessary to gain access to the various runes which often define the playstyle of their chosen class and spec. This has caused some obvious issues for certain classes. I, for example, play a warrior, and it feels like half of my runes were only obtainable by me going behind enemy lines into alliance territory, often fighting my way through whole groups of the boys in blue in the process. For many people, this is a downside to the rune system thus far, and has limited their desire or ability to play certain specs and classes. But for me, I've got to say, I think it's great. Honestly, it might just be that I've always loved the concept of vanilla world PvP and going on long, dangerous adventures, Or it could possibly just be because I think that Duskwood is the coolest place to run around bumping into enemies and fighting for your life. I don't know. But I have had a blast raiding into enemy territory, and from what I've seen in Stone Talon, it looks like there are a lot of Alliance players who feel the same way. I have to assume that the devs intended to create this ripe environment for world PvP by deciding to put necessary rune stuff in awkward places like Stone Talon, Duskwood and Redridge Mountains. And as your resident Redridge ganker, I love this. It feels very vanilla to me. If there was one thing I would love to see going forward though, it would be for more PvP rewards to not be bound to a battleground and its associated faction. If Tim and I spend a night fighting allies in Duskwood and gain hundreds or thousands of honour points from doing so, it would be nice if there was some way that we could convert that into rewards. I'm not saying that amazing gear needs to be handed out for world PvPers, but I see no reason why titles, like the Alliance and Horde Slayer titles from BFA, couldn't be implemented as a way to reward players for world PvP and to inspire them to go out and do it. Just some food for thought, Blizz. So moving on from PvP, what about the runes themselves then? The feature that was touted as being the big addition coming with the season. Well, I've already given my 2 cents on how they're obtained, which I'm personally quite happy with. But what about their effects? Well, I'm quite into the system, and whilst I've only played on my warrior so far, I have been raiding with, playing alongside and fighting against every other class, so I consider myself fairly well informed. The biggest upside of the runic system as I see it is that it genuinely allows you to significantly vary the way that your class plays, rather than just building on its pre-existing strengths in vanilla. That keeps your character feeling fresh, as does the ability to change your runes to reflect the content you're engaging with at any particular moment. I use different runes for different situations on my warrior. There are runes which are clearly designed to aid in tanking, to give me an edge in PvP, and even runes which are preferable depending on what weapon loadout I equip for dealing damage when raiding. This extra level of customization isn't overly complex, yet it does add an extra tactical aspect to class design that I personally appreciate. And whilst I've already talked about the way that the runes are obtained and how I like the world PvP that enables, I do also really like the mystery, the secret element that was seen quite a lot with the Warlock class, for example, with Metamorphosis. And I would love to see more of that questing, exploring, discovering side of the runes going into the later phases. However, the runic system isn't without its problems. Some people are understandably not as keen as I am on travelling to enemy zones at low levels just to obtain what is arguably a core element of your class. And whilst I don't think that the runes have broken the vanilla spirit of the classes any more than the raiding experience has done, they've still made certain classes very strong indeed, which can lead to frustrating moments, especially in PvP. If you've ever tried to fight a paladin who has all cooldowns available, you'll understand what I mean. But as with all features in Season of Discovery, we can expect to see further development and tuning of the runic system in Phase 2 and beyond. And this is the point that I'd like to conclude on. Ultimately, Season of Discovery has always been, in my optimistic opinion, a sort of beta test for Classic Plus. It's an opportunity for the devs to throw different ideas and mechanics at the vanilla game and its audience to see what works and what doesn't. For that process to be worthwhile, they need to go out on a limb from time to time, trying things and tweaking them if they don't quite work as planned. But so far, I think that the devs working on this season of Classic are doing a great job, and if the health of my server is any indication of how the rest of the game is doing, it seems like a lot of players agree with me. I highly recommend that you give SOD a try when Phase 2 releases this week. I can guarantee that if you're starting fresh, you won't be alone. And if you're coming back after a break, there's no better time to pick up where you left off. Now, if you want to play along with me or just see for yourself what the game is like, you can find me on Chaos Bolt, as I've said, and I stream live on Twitch fairly often, usually on Mondays and Fridays. I've linked to my Twitch in the comments if you want to check it out. I hope that you found this video informative, and if you're considering playing Classic WoW, I hope that it helped you make up your mind to give it a go. Let me know what you're most looking forward to for Phase 2 of the season in the comments below, and I will see all of you in Azeroth. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.